Hello and welcome to this PriceBeam webinar. My name is Finn Hansen. I'm one of the co-founders at PriceBeam, and I'm extremely excited today to have with me both PriceBeam's own Helio Eisen, who is our general manager and commercial director for Latin America, and our special guest today, AIS Soto, who is a global RGM director with I don't think I'm offending anyone by saying a long experience in the RGM field. So welcome to this webinar, and we're very lucky to have you guys. Helio and I are going to have a chat about RGM trends and important areas around price optimization and other fields. If you do have questions as a participant, please type in your questions in the Q&A in Zoom, and we will try to answer a few of them towards the end if time permits. But thank you, and over to you guys.
Okay, thanks, Finn. AIS, wonderful to have you here. Please present yourself to our audience and talk a little bit about what you've done already and what you intend to do in RGM.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here today with all of our audience. So, hola, hello everyone. I'm AIS, and first off, I want to thank Finn. I want to thank Helio. I want to thank Chris and Nicola for having me on this episode of this set of webinars. I'm thrilled to be here today. My name is AIS Soto, and I've been working on the RGM spectrum for roughly more than a decade now. So as Finn was pointing out, I have had a long run doing RGM. I will introduce myself a bit professionally. I started my career back in the 90s, which seems like long ago, with Procter & Gamble. I was doing some market research with P&G at the time. I learned a ton about summarizing documents, being succinct and to the point, doing one-pagers, and trying to be as objective as possible as part of that first experience out of college. Then I had the chance to work for the Kellogg company, now Kellanova, as you know, the company is going through a transition as we speak. And there I spent 24 years. I did a little bit of market research. That was the reason I joined the company back in the days. And then I had the opportunity to work for the finance team. I spent 7 years doing finance in different roles, commercial roles, innovation roles, new business development roles, and then manufacturing roles that have served me very well as I understood how the food was made. So that was the core of how the food that we manufactured at the time was made for our consumers and shoppers. And then luckily, I had the chance to go back to the commercial team, doing a little bit of category management, which has to do with the planograms and how to present products at the point of sale and what have you. And roughly in the last years, maybe 7-8 years at Kellogg, I did market RGM, revenue growth management, starting to work for Mexico, then for Latin America, and the past 6 years roughly on the global team doing RGM for Kellogg, which allowed me to also go to Reckitt and also spend time with the Reckitt company, which I worked also doing global RGM for the past year, and happily getting to sense and see another business, another set of categories.
Great. It's a wonderful career, contributing and bringing value to very important organizations. You know, when we talk about LATAM, mainly in American and European executives, we always think about inflation. Inflation is a plague,
Yes.
and we generally have it here more than in other geographies, although in the past 1-2 years, they also felt the burden of this plague. Can you tell us a little bit about how inflation harmed or, required a different tools from RGM to keep the prices afloat?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Elio. So I would mention that the inflation is, what it's a permanent conversation in RGM forums because we want to make sure that we are delivering net price realization. With that said, is we want to make sure that our brands go to the marketplace and are valued and are seen as valuable, and we keep pace at least at the same rate as inflation, as it happens in different markets across the globe. I will say I've seen in my experience in the past years that companies perhaps were shown these big inflation rates we had during the pandemic and during these past years. And pretty much everyone was riding the wave in the sense of, hey, man, we have this inflationary environment. It's now the time to be taking aggressive price increases to keep up with inflation. And then this is something that we've seen happening in different categories, different markets. To me, and now that the landscape is shifting a little bit, it's smart to rethink about the way we were doing price increases, because we had, in a sense, this opportunity to do that even constantly. And in some markets, I would say globally, everyone was doing that. But in some markets, like Latin American markets, we see that happening maybe twice a year, 3 times a year, even to the extreme rate of Argentina, where inflation rate was hitting 80% and what have you. And then you'll see price increases taking place every month. So that's a bit of a challenge, and that's something that was required by the local conditions. But now things are stabilizing in some markets, so I think it's smart to just take a step back and rethink the way we want to approach inflation. Because one thing that happens in RGM, and this is something that I will mention, we want to make sure we deliver today, but we also need to deliver tomorrow. And in that balance, we need to make sure that we are not hurting the way that we're seen by consumers and say, hey, you are going too much, taking price too much, too soon, too often. We don't want that to happen. We need to be more surgical in the way we take price increases. And to me, the way to complement this is, hey, we may take price increase, which is something that is required to maintain and keep up with inflation. However, we need to rethink about how often we go to that, and also what other strategies we can implement to make sure that we are accompanying those with some benefit and some value for consumers, shoppers, and our retailer partners. So in that regard, I will say, what about thinking about different promo strategies? Think about PPA offerings, thinking about ways to approach this without being so direct and maybe too aggressive when it comes to taking prices.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very good explanation. I would want to go a little bit deeper on that. When you say about other measures, one of the measures which is very known and not very much liked by consumers is shrinkflation. So
yes.
you lower the size of the packages, you diminish the size of the packages, and you keep the prices. What do you think about it, and pros and cons?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. No, that's a fantastic question, and we can chat about it for a long time, but I'll try to be brief. So I'll say this is something that can be done in the right way, but also in the wrong way. We have seen examples of companies that have been too aggressive, and I remember a famous chocolate. I will not mention the brand because this example didn't go very well. That actually decreased the way the product. They actually reformatted the actual product that was kind of something that was a legacy product that was well known by shoppers and consumers, and they did some adjustments in that. But it was so notorious that shoppers and consumers felt, in a sense, disappointed by the way this was presented, even though they maintained prices, but it was too evident that the product was altered. So I would say, if this is something that is noticeable by shoppers and consumers and they care about these changes, then you are not doing it right because you are going to extreme. On the other hand, there are examples of companies that have done it in a more, I would say, step by step or maybe a little by little approach, not as aggressive perhaps, but actually can have the same result. There are cases in which you start by doing slight adjustments and then maybe round 2, round 3. So to me, and to answer the question, one way to think about this in a good way is to perhaps see it in a long term. It's not something that you do at once and then you just walk away from that and hope for the best. That would not be a good strategy, but say, hey, if we need to do that and adjust that and we need to play with food content, for example, We need to validate that the pack goes according to that, so you need to adjust your packaging so it does not look like in some products that you are seeing half empty boxes or containers or what have you, because that looks terrible. And the other piece is you may want to go step by step. We take this step now, we wait for a few months, then we do the next step, and then final phase happens in a year or 18 months or what have you.
Okay, very, very, very good advices. One of the topics that I wanted to develop with you, and I think it's one of your most liked topics, is OBPC. So what could you tell us about OBPC in your past companies? How it was approached?
Certainly, certainly. So this acronym of OBPPC is referring to the occasion, brand, price, pack, and channel, or retail environment, also known as retail environment. And it's an approach, it's a methodology that allows you to continue growing the business. So perhaps, and just as an intro for our audience that may be not as close to RGM, but one of the core goals of RGM is to maintain growth in the business. And typically this happens via incrementality. We have a business that is running, and then how do we go about with pricing activations, with promo activations, with trade investment, build that business and satisfying, creating value for everyone involved, shoppers, consumers, and trade partners, and the company that we work for. So in that regard, OBPPC allows us to take a look at how products are consumed. It starts with the occasion, the consumption occasion. That's the parting point, which may seem counterintuitive because you say, hey, I do have this brand and we produce this item and this is something that we bring to the marketplace. That's kind of maybe a way of thinking about this. The other way is, hey, I want to explore and better understand how consumers are consuming what they're having. And I can see throughout the day, they wake up and they do whatever activities they do. They have these things to eat. They have these things to throughout the day. And then they come back, they are commuting and what have you. So you track the full day of how these activities are taking place. And then understanding how they are consuming what they are consuming, you can propose, hey, my portfolio of brands satisfies these occasions, but I seem to have white spaces or opportunities to provide something that they're doing already, but I'm not covering with the portfolio and perhaps having the right offering for them. And this implies the rest of the BPPC, which is the brand and the right pack and the right price, and to be found at the right point of sale, which is the channel part. So with that into account, you can uncover opportunities to develop this incremental business by understanding how is it that they are actually doing their daily activities and satisfying all the occasions that may be in that landscape. So that to me is very powerful because allows you to explore things that perhaps were areas that you were not even considering before.
Is it measurable, the benefit? Can you measure how much you improve?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Finn. Yes, you can measure it because once you have identified that occasion that you're not currently servicing, you need to go about and try to build an estimate. Hey, this is worth this much, and then you activate and you can validate, you can also see if this has true incrementality to it, which by design is supposed to, because you were not covering that occasion before. Of course, things happen in the commercial world, we know, but in the end, it's ideal that to say you have a departing point of saying, I'm not servicing this occasion, I need to put something in there. And and that's the way to think about this.
Right.
Yeah, I would like to enter a little bit on that last sentence that you said we try and validate. You know that trials are expensive to do in the market. So what kind of insights would you look for before trying and validating these strategies?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. So, and let me perhaps build a little bit more on RGM and how I see RGM. RGM to me is both a combination of science and art. So when you think about scientific piece, you have all the modeling, like the modeling the price beam brings to the table, and all the accuracy and understanding how you got the incrementality, this perhaps the price back curves, and having a sense of what to expect once you do some activation in the marketplace. On the other hand, the art piece, or the art part to me, is related more to fine-tuning what you know about your market, your shoppers, your consumers, and things perhaps. And let me give you a silly example. The model will give us a number, no, 10.2 reais, for example, in Brazil. And then you say, that's not a commercial price point. We need to bring this back to 10 because no one is carrying this small cents in their pocket. No, that's where the artistic piece comes to play. That's kind of how I see these two things taking place. So in that regard, one of the ways to do it is to model, no, and say, hey, we have this opportunity, we can model. And then again, there's a spectrum in the RGM arena. The best model, so to speak, is the actual marketplace. You launch it, and then you realize if your idea was successful or not. But to your point, that's a bit expensive. So there are other approaches: modeling, consumer testing, conversation with maybe potential benchmarking that can be built that can allow you to get a sense of how valuable your offering is.
Thank you, AIS. On a more personal note, let's put this way. Could you talk about your biggest success in your career, and if you would like also to disclose your biggest failure?
Of course. No, absolutely. No. I would say, and let me start with the latter question. So I would say one of the things that was maybe something that haunted me at the beginning of my career was the world of assumptions. And this is something that I realized that it was not a good thing to have, because I was doing some, for example, market research testing, and I was like, well, the agency is working on this, we're all good, and they will call me back when the job is done. And then that's what was like, well, maybe not, because things happen along the way, and it'll be ideal for you to validate and have some touch points here and there. Now, this is actually happening, and that happened early at the beginning of my career. I will tell you, it's super open about it, no? And so I think that was a big learning, no? And it happens with other circumstances and business realities, that it's ideal, just to to validate that things are progressing as you want them to progress, and make sure that everyone has what they need, and then put yourself at the service of others that are helping you or working with you to make sure that they have what they need from you as well. So to me, that was kind of something that hurt me, and then I learned my way about it, and then it's not persisting anymore. But anyways, that was a big something that happened to me. On the other hand, I will tell you, one of the things that is thrilling to me, and this is why I like RGM so much, is that you can see the results of what you're implementing right away in the marketplace. I can refer to many projects. One that comes to mind is a project that we simplified the footprint in this scale of time of the packs that we offer, the cereal boxes we had. We had an array of many boxes, and we narrowed that down without hurting the business and creating enormous efficiencies for our manufacturing side, while servicing shoppers, consumers, while adjusting the price points, while making sure that our retailer partners had the margins they were expecting. That was a big combo. So just to visualize it, I want to maybe put in your head the visual of a Rubik's Cube, in which you have many different views and what have you, and you need to make sure that everyone has every single face of that cube is actually showing the color that you want, right? So multi-dimensional, and to me that was big. That was quite impressive. Of course, teamwork is not something that is not mine to own. No, it's something that was built as a team, but certainly proud and happy about it. And this is one of examples of RGM working and providing value to the business and to everyone involved, shoppers, consumers, retailers, and the company.
Great. To many executives, either North Americans or Europeans, LATAM is a region, and like an homogeneous block of countries. And well, we are locals, and we know there are many differences. As an executive that worked on a regional level, what kind of differences in the main geographies? Let's talk about the main countries. Would you highlight, for example, between Brazilians and Mexicans? What do you like these executives from abroad, LATAM? What do you like them to know?
Absolutely. No, thank you. And building on that, I would say it's amazing because it's a complex region. This is a complex region, has many currencies. Even if you think about the Caribbean, just the Caribbean on its own has like, I don't know, maybe 20 currencies. So you can imagine how difficult it is to manage a region as the Caribbean is, no? But Latin America is vast. It's a vibrant region, a lot of activity taking place, a lot of opportunities for growth. Many things are happening and taking place in Latin America, and it's very exciting to work in this part of the world. And I would say, and pointing out the differences like you're mentioning, Helio, I would say, even though it's everyone is Latin American, we share common heritage and pretty much the language, except for Brazil, that has Portuguese, of course, but the rest of the region is pretty much a Spanish-speaking region. There are also nuanced differences that I want to point out. In the case of Brazil, and having had the opportunity to work with the teams over there, I would say I have one word, which is taxes. Taxes, about RGM, that's a big area of complexity because there's regional taxes and all the differences that are within the country. So if you think about setting a price point or about suggesting a price point, let's caveat that here. We always suggest that then retailers do have the final say on price point. But anyways, when you're suggesting that, it's challenging just because you cannot say, hey, we have a national price for Brazil. That does not necessarily exist. That's a challenge on its own. Maybe different from other regions in Latin America, which is maybe more manageable in that regard. On the other hand, think about geographically. So Mexico, being very close to the US, has a ton of influence of the US brands, of the US ways of doing business, which is different. I would mention, and thinking about Europe, no? So all these retailers from Europe, think about the Carrefours of the world that have a strong presence in South America, not as strong in Latin America, north part of Latin America, Mexico and Central America, not as strong. But you think about the dealing with the contractual part of that is different, just because the approach that it's used in Europe is different, and that will permeate into the negotiations with local retailers in South America, global retailers in South America. So that's another difference. The other piece I want to point out has to do with how we do business in this part of the world. Having HFS, high frequency / traditional stores or mom and pops being so prevalent across the region, data availability is a challenge because that's not something that the other markets see. I mean, if you think about some advanced markets in Asia, if you think about the US, Canada, and certainly Europe, data is something you enjoy and have a ton of, and everyone has access to it. In this part of the world, many people do have very traditional ways of doing business, and there's no records on data, and then you need to find out the best way to work with what you have.
Thank you, AIS, for this answer. I would like to point out to you that here in Brazil, we are in the midst of a new legislation to simplify the tax regulations. Yes, it's a very welcome step. What worries a lot of people is that because of the tax burden, our, let's say, only tax, a kind of IVA tax, would be, or it's probably one of the highest in the world. like something of 23 to 25%, which is a very, very high, let's say, consumption tax. So let's hope for the best. Politicians are fighting around.
That's something we have in common with Latin America. We believe our politicians could be better. I'm sure that's maybe I go with them as well.
My last question to you, we are arriving at the end of our talk, is how do you see the future of RGM in the organizations?
Yes, no, bright future, bright future. To me, RGM, and this is something that speaks about kind of how recent the function is. If you think about the typical corporate functions as, finance or marketing or sales, what have you, they have been there for a long time. So RGM is kind of the new kid in town, or something relatively fresh as opposed to maybe those more traditional functions. So to me, the future is bright. I think we need to make sure that what is the purpose of RGM? To me, is driving sure that the offerings make sense, that there is a cohesiveness in the portfolio, that there's some money to be had in the right way, with both, as I mentioned before, long-term and also short-term as part of the equation. So that is RGM to me. To me, it sits in the midst of, say, finance, marketing, and sales. In between is this function, this strong point of view that represents RGM, this discipline that RGM has. So to me, the future is bright. There's a ton of opportunities to continue bringing this discipline, this cadence, this rhythm into business proposals, and making sure that prices are working for you, your promotional efforts are working for you, the money you put with the trade partners is working for you, and to grow your business. So that, to me, is something that will be part of the conversation from the get-go. And I also mentioned to you, I've seen that some companies do not have RGM yet in place, and I would say that this is something that they're missing out, because this is something that the rest is doing. And I would say the curve of maybe differential is rising for those who are being left behind versus those that are doing those practices in a more advanced way. So bright future, bright future.
Great. Finn, would you have a final question or a question from the audience?
Yeah, but if the audience wants to ask through the Q&A, feel free to do so. I have a question actually on maybe the outlook. I'm getting the feeling, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but that RGM has been a bit easier the last year or two because there was inflation. Not that it is an excuse, but inflation means that shoppers, consumers, even internally in many teams, it's like we must do something about prices.
Yes.
And it's almost become an excuse to let's increase our prices.
Mm-hmm.
Now that inflation, not everywhere in the world, I know there's still some countries with high inflation, but in many countries it's coming down, right? What's in store? What's in the toolbox for RGM next year?
Yeah, great.
If it's not inflation.
Great question. I would say we need to, to me, RGM, and maybe going back to these three levers now of pricing, promo, and trade investment. I would say now we need to shift gears and perhaps look much more carefully into promo, how we go about promo, and then PPA, which is formally or not another lever of RGM, but PPA, with PPA being price pack architecture, and having the right offering, the right prices, perhaps playing a little bit with different sizes and now shoppers, is the way to go from my perspective. And then promo, because to your point, Finn, it's no longer about, hey, let's take a wild price increase twice a year, double digit, what have you, which we saw in the previous couple of years. And that's no longer the case. So being surgical, being very smart, and then, of course, the work like a price beam does on helping us understand what is those price points that are core, will bring you the incrementality that are most appreciated shoppers and consumers. That's also the way to go, to put some logic and some intent into the moves that you will do, because they need to be surgical. They cannot be broad, or this blanket approach everyone takes. Let's take a 7% price increase across the board. That's no longer the case. We need to be way more strict and smart about it.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of the questions. But thank you so much, both Helio and AIS, for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure learning from your experience. If the audience wants to share this webinar, you can go to the website and sign up, and we will be able to send you a recording as well. And I'm sure that we will also be able to provide the details. If you don't already know AIS, then to get in touch if you want to to benefit further from the experience. But thank you so much, both of you, for your time today, and to the audience as well. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you all that joined, and thank you all for having me. And looking forward to reconnect on LinkedIn. If we're not connected, let's connect via LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.